Welcome to this wonderful story of Snowy, a curious little cat who embarks on an exciting adventure in a magical garden. As you read Snowy's journey, you will not only enjoy a fun and heartwarming tale, but also learn new words, phrases, and grammar in English. This story is designed for English learners at the beginner level, helping you improve your vocabulary, sentence structure, and understanding of everyday expressions. Through Snowy's eyes, you'll encounter simple yet powerful words related to nature, animals, emotions, and actions. As Snowy explores her world, you will discover new ways to describe things around you and express your thoughts in English. From learning words for colors, objects, and places, to understanding how sentences are formed, this story will support your language learning in an engaging and enjoyable way. Each part of the story gives you the chance to practice reading comprehension and expand your knowledge of English. You will also notice how Snowy's experiences can help you understand some key grammar concepts, like how to use present and past tenses, descriptive adjectives, and simple sentence structures. Whether you're new to English or looking to improve your skills, this story provides a fun and effective way to practice. So, let's join Snowy on her adventure and let's learn English together. Part 1. The Lost Cat. Once upon a time, there was a small white cat named Snowy. She was not a big cat, but she was very cute. Snowy had soft fur that shone in the sunlight. Her fur was so white that it looked like fresh snow on a winter day, which is how she got her name. Snowy had big, round eyes that were bright blue, and she loved to play outside. Snowy was a very curious cat, and she loved to explore her home in the garden. She lived with her owner, a kind young woman named Lily, who loved Snowy very much. Lily had adopted Snowy when she was just a tiny kitten. From the very first day they met, Lily knew that Snowy was special. She had been looking for a cat for a long time, and when she saw Snowy at the animal shelter, it was love at first sight. Snowy looked up at Lily with her big blue eyes, and Lily immediately knew that she wanted to take her home. Lily took Snowy in her arms and promised to care for her forever. Snowy had never been happier. From that day on, Snowy lived in a beautiful little house with Lily. The house was surrounded by a lovely garden full of flowers. There were roses, daisies, and sunflowers in the garden. Snowy loved to run around the garden, jumping from one spot to another. She would chase butterflies, smell the flowers, and sometimes even try to catch the small birds that flew by. The birds were always too quick for Snowy, but she didn't mind. She loved to watch them. Snowy also loved to climb up the big oak tree in the corner of the garden. The tree had thick branches that were perfect for climbing, and Snowy would sit on a branch for hours, looking down at the world below. Every morning, Lily would open the door to the garden and call Snowy to come outside. "Come on, Snowy, let's play," Lily would say with a smile on her face. Snowy would jump up and run to the door as quickly as she could, her little paws making soft thudding sounds on the floor. She was always excited to go outside and play with Lily. Sometimes, Lily would sit on the grass and Snowy would jump into her lap, purring happily. They would spend hours together in the garden, laughing and playing. But one sunny morning, something unexpected happened. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining brightly, and the sky was clear and blue. The air was warm, but not too hot. It was the perfect day for playing outside. Lily opened the door to the garden and called for Snowy. "Come on, Snowy, let's go outside," she said, her voice full of excitement. Snowy heard Lily's voice and quickly ran over to the door. She was excited, as always, to spend time with Lily in the garden. Snowy ran outside and jumped into the soft grass. She loved how the grass felt on her paws. It was cool and soft, and it tickled her feet as she ran through it. Snowy jumped and rolled around in the grass, feeling happy and free. She chased after a butterfly that flew past her, her little paws reaching for it, but the butterfly was too fast. Snowy stopped for a moment to catch her breath. As she looked up, she saw something that caught her attention. A small bird flying high in the sky. Snowy's eyes grew wide with excitement. She loved to watch the birds fly, and sometimes she would even try to catch them. This time, the bird was flying low enough for Snowy to reach. Without thinking, Snowy started to run after the bird. She ran as fast as she could, her little paws moving quickly across the grass. The bird was ahead of her, flying just out of reach. Snowy ran faster, but the bird was always a little bit ahead. Snowy did not stop running. She wanted to catch that bird. She wanted to prove that she could do it. The bird flew higher and higher, and Snowy kept chasing it. As Snowy ran, she didn't notice how far she had gone from the house. She was so focused on the bird that she didn't look around. She just kept running, faster and faster. Snowy was excited, but she also started to feel a little bit lost. She didn't know where she was anymore. The garden, which had always seemed so big, now felt strange and unfamiliar. Snowy stopped for a moment and looked around. She couldn't see the house. She couldn't see Lily. She didn't know which way to go. Snowy felt a little scared. She meowed loudly, hoping that Lily would hear her and come to find her. But there was no answer. The garden was quiet. Snowy looked around again, but she saw only trees, bushes, and flowers. She was far from home, and she didn't know how to get back. Snowy started to walk slowly, looking for a way back to the house. She didn't want to be lost. She wanted to go back to Lily and the safe, warm house. As Snowy walked through the garden, she came across a small path. The path was narrow and winding, and it was lined with tall flowers and trees. Snowy was not sure if this path would lead her back home, but she decided to follow it anyway. Maybe it would bring her back to Lily. So, Snowy walked down the path, step by step, carefully watching where she was going. She walked slowly at first, her paws making soft sounds on the ground. The path was quiet, and the air was cool. The flowers on both sides of the path smelled sweet, but Snowy didn't stop to smell them. She was too worried about finding her way back. As Snowy walked, she began to feel more and more tired. Her little legs were starting to ache, and she wanted to rest. But Snowy knew she couldn't stop. She had to find her way home. She couldn't stay out here alone in the garden forever. She had to find Lily. After walking for a while, Snowy came to a small pond. The pond was beautiful. The water was clear, and Snowy could see little fish swimming in it. Snowy was thirsty and wanted to drink the water, but she remembered that she was looking for Lily. Snowy didn't want to waste any time. She knew she had to keep moving. So, instead of drinking, she continued down the path. But as Snowy walked further, she began to feel more and more tired. The sun was high in the sky now, and the heat made Snowy feel sleepy. She stopped for a moment to rest on a patch of soft grass. She lay down for a few minutes, closing her eyes. The peaceful sounds of the garden made Snowy feel calm, but she knew she couldn't stay there for too long. Suddenly, Snowy heard a noise. It was a sound she recognized, Lily's voice. Snowy's heart leapt with joy. She stood up quickly and began to run towards the sound. "Snowy! Snowy!" Lily called, her voice full of love and worry. Snowy meowed loudly, calling back to her. She ran faster, her legs moving quickly through the grass. Finally, Snowy saw Lily. Lily was standing near a big tree, looking for her. When Lily saw Snowy, she smiled with relief and ran to her. Snowy, I was so worried about you, Lily said, scooping Snowy up into her arms. Snowy meowed happily and rubbed her head against Lily's face. Lily hugged Snowy tightly, and Snowy felt safe in her arms. Lily carried Snowy back to the house, and as they walked, Snowy felt her heart fill with happiness. She was back with her owner, and everything was going to be okay. Snowy learned that it was always best to stay close to Lily. No matter how beautiful the garden or how exciting the chase, Snowy knew she should never wander too far from home. And so, Snowy was safe again. She was happy to be with Lily, and she promised never to get lost again. Part 2. The Search for Snowy. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting a warm orange glow over the little house and its beautiful garden. Inside the house, Lily sat at the kitchen table, sipping a cup of tea. She was thinking about Snowy. Snowy had not yet come back inside from the garden, and it was getting late. Lily looked out the window, hoping to see Snowy running toward the door. But the garden was still, and there was no sign of the small white cat. Lily's heart began to fill with worry. Snowy had never stayed outside this long before. Usually Snowy would come inside when the sun started to set, but tonight she had not come back. Lily stood up from the table and walked to the door, opening it slowly. She called out softly, "Snowy, Snowy, come inside." There was no answer. The only sound Lily could hear was the wind gently blowing through the trees. She stepped out onto the porch and looked around the garden. The flowers were closing for the night, and the shadows were growing longer. Snowy was nowhere to be seen. Lily's worry grew stronger. She knew Snowy loved to play outside, but she also knew that Snowy was not a cat who wandered far from the house. Lily had always felt safe knowing that Snowy was close by, but now she began to feel uneasy. She took a deep breath and decided to search for Snowy. She couldn't just wait inside. She had to find her beloved cat. She walked out into the garden, calling Snowy's name again. "Snowy, where are you, little one?" she called, her voice filled with concern. She walked past the roses and the daisies, looking under the bushes and behind the trees. She checked the big oak tree where Snowy liked to climb, but there was no sign of her. Lily felt a knot in her stomach. She knew that Snowy had been running around earlier, chasing butterflies and birds, but Lily couldn't remember the last time Snowy had gone this far into the garden. Lily's steps became quicker as she walked down the small path that led into the deeper parts of the garden. She had never walked this far before, and the path felt unfamiliar to her. The trees on either side of the path seemed taller now, and the flowers were thicker and wilder. The further Lily walked, the more lost she felt. "Snowy!" Lily called again, her voice trembling slightly. She stopped for a moment, listening for any sound. She heard nothing but the rustling of leaves in the wind. Lily knew she had to keep moving, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Snowy should have been easy to find. She was a small white cat, and there were no other cats in the garden. But now, Lily was beginning to worry that Snowy had gotten lost. Lily walked along the path, pushing through the tall grass and thick bushes. She felt like she had been walking for a long time, and she was starting to feel tired. Her legs were beginning to ache, but she didn't want to stop. She had to find Snowy. As she continued on the path, Lily remembered the small pond she had passed when she first moved into the house. She had not seen it in a long time, but she knew it was somewhere in the garden. Snowy loved to play near the water, and it was possible that Snowy had wandered down to the pond to drink. Lily decided to head in that direction. After a few more minutes of walking, Lily finally saw the pond. The water sparkled in the fading light, and the small fish swam lazily beneath the surface. But there was no sign of Snowy. Lily stood at the edge of the pond, looking around carefully. She knew Snowy liked the pond, but she had no idea where Snowy could be now. She felt a wave of sadness wash over her. "Where are you, Snowy?" Lily whispered to herself. She looked down at the water and felt a tear slip down her cheek. She had never been so worried in her life. Snowy was like family to her, and she couldn't imagine being without her. Lily wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. She knew she had to stay calm. Snowy was smart, and she knew the garden well. She had to be somewhere nearby. With renewed determination, Lily turned around and started walking back along the path. She couldn't give up now. She had to find Snowy and bring her home. As Lily walked, she began to call Snowy's name again, louder this time. "Snowy, where are you?" She listened carefully for any sound, hoping to hear the familiar meow of her cat. But the garden remained silent, the only sounds being the wind and the rustling of leaves. Lily walked for what seemed like hours, checking every part of the garden she could think of. She looked behind every tree and under every bush, but Snowy was nowhere to be found. The garden had become darker as the sun sank lower in the sky, and Lily began to feel a deep sense of fear in her heart. What if Snowy couldn't find her way back home? What if something had happened to her? Just when Lily was about to give up, she heard something, a faint sound, almost like a soft meow. Lily stopped in her tracks and listened carefully. The meow came again, a little louder this time. It was Snowy. Lily's heart raced with hope. She followed the sound of the meowing, running faster now, calling out, "Snowy, I'm coming, Snowy." After a few moments, Lily saw a flash of white. It was Snowy. Snowy was sitting on a low branch of a tree, looking down at her owner with wide, worried eyes. Snowy's fur was messy, and her little paws looked tired from walking, but she was safe. Lily smiled with relief and ran towards Snowy, calling her name. "Snowy! Oh, thank goodness!" Snowy meowed again and jumped down from the tree, landing softly on the ground. She ran to Lily and rubbed her head against Lily's legs. Lily bent down and scooped Snowy up into her arms, holding her tightly. "I'm so glad I found you, Snowy," Lily whispered. "I was so worried about you." Snowy purred softly in Lily's arms, feeling safe and loved. She had been scared too, but now she was back where she belonged, in Lily's warm embrace. Lily smiled and kissed Snowy on the head. "Let's go home now," she said. Together they walked back to the house, Snowy nestled in Lily's arms. The garden no longer seemed so big and scary now that Snowy was safe and sound. As they reached the house, Lily opened the door and stepped inside. She placed Snowy gently on the floor, and Snowy ran to her favorite spot by the window. Lily closed the door behind them and sat down beside Snowy. The evening was calm now, and Lily felt her heart finally relax. She had found Snowy, and everything was going to be okay. But as Snowy lay down, purring contentedly, Lily couldn't help but feel that something had changed. She realized that sometimes, even when we feel lost, we always find our way home. With Snowy by her side, Lily knew that there was no place in the world she would rather be. Part 3. A New Adventure for Snowy. The next few days after Snowy's little adventure in the garden passed quietly. Snowy seemed to be more careful about where she played, sticking closer to the house and Lily. Lily, too, was extra cautious, always keeping a watchful eye on Snowy when she went outside. Despite the worries of the previous days, Lily was grateful to have Snowy safe and sound again. They spent more time together in the garden, enjoying the warm afternoons and the beauty of the flowers that bloomed all around. Lily had grown very attached to Snowy. She loved watching Snowy chase butterflies and rest in the sun, her white fur glowing like a little cloud. But as much as Lily enjoyed their time together, she knew Snowy was a curious cat. Snowy always had an adventurous spirit. Lily could see it in the way Snowy's eyes sparkled whenever she spotted something new in the garden, or when she tried to catch a butterfly that flitted just out of reach. Snowy was always ready for a new adventure. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, Snowy wandered into the garden while Lily was inside the house, reading a book. It was a calm, peaceful day, and Snowy felt the pull of the garden once again. She had been playing with a few fallen leaves and chasing shadows, but today was different. Today, Snowy saw something that she had never seen before, a small opening in the far corner of the garden. The opening was hidden behind some thick bushes and tall grass, but Snowy's sharp eyes had spotted it. She walked closer, her curiosity growing with each step. The opening led to a small pathway. It was narrow and winding, and it seemed to go deeper into the garden, further than Snowy had ever gone before. Snowy's ears perked up as she sniffed the air. There was something mysterious about this path, something that called to her. Snowy wasn't afraid. She was brave and full of curiosity. With a soft meow, she stepped onto the path, pushing through the tall grass and the thick bushes. She had never been down this way before, but she was excited to see what lay ahead. The path was quiet, and Snowy's paws made soft rustling sounds on the ground as she walked. The further she went, the more the garden around her seemed to change. The trees were taller here, their leaves darker, and the air was cooler. Snowy noticed that the flowers were different too. Instead of the bright, colorful flowers near the house, these flowers were more subdued in color. Some even had a faint, sweet smell that Snowy hadn't noticed before. As Snowy continued along the path, she began to feel like she was in a secret part of the garden, a part that was hidden from the rest of the world. The path curved around, and soon Snowy found herself standing near a small stream. The water was clear, and Snowy could hear the soft sound of the water flowing over the rocks. Snowy's curiosity led her closer to the water. She bent down and took a few careful sips, the cool water refreshing her after her walk. Snowy sat by the edge of the stream for a while, watching the water move. The world seemed peaceful here, and for a moment Snowy felt completely at home. She could hear birds singing in the trees, and the sound of the stream flowing was calming. Snowy closed her eyes, enjoying the moment. But as she sat there, something in the distance caught her eye. At first, it was just a shadow, something moving among the trees. Snowy's ears perked up, and her tail flicked with interest. The shadow moved closer, and Snowy could see it more clearly now. It was a small animal, but it wasn't like any animal Snowy had seen before. It was brown and had a long tail that flicked from side to side like a squirrel, but it was different somehow. The creature had large, bright eyes that seemed to sparkle in the dim light. Snowy crouched down low to the ground, her body ready to spring. She was curious, but she was also cautious. She had learned her lesson from the bird she had chased before, and she knew it was important to be careful. The little creature didn't seem to notice Snowy at first. It moved slowly, sniffing the ground, its tail flicking nervously. Snowy's instincts told her to wait, so she stayed as still as possible, watching the creature with keen eyes. After a moment, the little creature noticed Snowy. It stopped, its bright eyes widening with surprise. Snowy froze, not wanting to scare it away. The creature seemed to study Snowy for a moment before it decided to make a move. It darted to the side, disappearing into the bushes, but not before giving Snowy one last curious glance. Snowy's heart raced a little. She had never seen anything like that before. She was excited by the chase, but also a bit confused. What kind of creature had she just seen? Snowy stood up and took a few steps forward, looking in the direction the creature had gone. She wasn't sure whether to follow it or not. It had moved so quickly, and Snowy wasn't sure if she could catch it. But there was something about the mystery of the creature that intrigued her. Snowy's curiosity was stronger than ever. She decided to follow it. Snowy padded quietly through the bushes, her white fur blending into the shadows of the trees. She moved carefully, trying to be as quiet as possible. The sound of the stream became fainter as she ventured deeper into the garden. The trees grew thicker, and the path became less clear. Snowy had to jump over roots and duck under branches, but she didn't mind. The thrill of the chase kept her going. As she followed the creature's trail, Snowy found herself entering a part of the garden she had never seen before. The trees here were tall and twisted, their branches stretching out in strange shapes. The ground was covered in soft, dark moss, and the air smelled of earth and leaves. It felt like a magical place, like something from one of the stories Lily had read to her. Suddenly, Snowy heard a rustling noise. She stopped, her ears twitching. She crouched low to the ground and looked around carefully. There, in front of her, was the little creature again. It was standing on its hind legs, looking right at her. Its bright eyes sparkled in the dim light, and its tail twitched nervously. Snowy stared at it, unsure of what to do next. The creature seemed to realize that Snowy wasn't a threat. It took a few steps forward, its eyes never leaving Snowy. Snowy, still cautious, decided not to chase it this time. Instead, she sat down and watched the creature from a distance. It moved closer, sniffing the air and looking at Snowy with curiosity. Snowy felt a strange connection to the little creature, something she had never felt before. After a few moments, the creature turned and began to walk away, disappearing into the underbrush. Snowy watched it go, her heart filled with wonder. She had encountered something new and mysterious, and the adventure had only just begun. Snowy stood up and walked back along the path, feeling a sense of excitement that she had never felt before. She couldn't wait to tell Lily about the strange creature she had met. As Snowy made her way back toward the house, the sun was beginning to set, casting a soft pink glow over the garden. She felt content, knowing that she had experienced something special. Snowy realized that there was so much more to discover in the world, and she couldn't wait to see what other adventures awaited her. Part 4. Home at Last. The days after Snowy's adventure in the mysterious part of the garden seemed to pass quickly. Snowy, ever the curious cat, found herself visiting the hidden path more and more often. Each time she walked down that winding trail, she discovered something new. Different flowers, small animals, and even unusual rocks that sparkled in the sunlight. The garden, once familiar and safe, was beginning to feel like a world full of secrets and surprises. But even with all the excitement of exploring this new part of the garden, Snowy never wandered too far from home. Every time she would come back to the house, She would curl up on her favorite cushion by the window, looking out at the beautiful, familiar sights of Lily's home. Snowy felt a strange mix of excitement and comfort in her heart. Excitement for the new things she had discovered, and comfort in knowing that she always had a safe place to return to. Lily, for her part, noticed that Snowy seemed a little more adventurous than before. She would sometimes hear the soft sound of Snowy's paws as the little cat padded around the house, always looking for something new to explore. And while Lily had once been worried when Snowy had wandered too far, she had come to realize that Snowy was no longer the tiny kitten she had adopted so many months ago. Snowy had grown into a bold, independent cat, filled with a spirit of adventure. Yet, no matter how far she roamed, Snowy always came back to her, always returned to the warmth and safety of their home. One bright afternoon, Snowy woke up from a peaceful nap by the window. The sun was shining brightly, casting a golden light over everything in the garden. Snowy stretched her legs and yawned before getting up and walking to the door. She had already spent some time playing with the flowers and chasing shadows in the garden earlier that day. But there was something about the afternoon air that made her feel as though there was more to discover. Lily was inside, sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea and reading a book. She had become used to Snowy's little explorations and was comfortable knowing her cat would always return to her. But this time, as Snowy walked toward the door, Lily noticed the glint in her eyes. Snowy was up to something. She was on another adventure. "Where are you going now, Snowy?" Lily asked, looking up from her book with a smile. She could tell Snowy was feeling especially curious that afternoon. Snowy looked back at her, gave a small meow, and pawed at the door. Lily chuckled and got up from the table, opening the door to let Snowy outside. "All right, you little adventurer, but be careful." Snowy meowed again, as if to say she would be fine, and stepped outside, disappearing into the garden. Lily smiled and watched her go, then returned to her book. Little did she know, this was going to be Snowy's biggest adventure yet. As Snowy walked down the familiar path toward the hidden part of the garden, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different today. The wind was softer, and the air smelled sweeter. She padded quietly along the trail, her white fur glowing in the afternoon light, and soon found herself at the stream again. But something had changed. The little creature she had met during her previous adventure was waiting by the water. It was sitting on a rock, its large eyes watching Snowy intently. This time, Snowy didn't hesitate. She walked closer, her tail held high with curiosity. The creature didn't move, but its bright eyes followed Snowy's every step. Snowy stopped a few feet away, unsure of what to do next. But this time, the little creature did something unexpected. It stood up on its hind legs and took a few steps toward Snowy, its tiny paws barely making a sound as it walked. Snowy watched in silence, wondering what this meant. The creature's eyes were kind and its movements were graceful, almost as if it was inviting Snowy to follow. Snowy took a step closer, her heart racing with excitement. She could feel a strange connection to the creature, a sense that they were both part of something much bigger, something magical. Snowy took another step, and this time the creature moved toward the bushes near the stream, as though beckoning Snowy to follow. Snowy followed without question, her curiosity getting the best of her. She moved slowly, carefully, as they walked together into the deeper parts of the garden. The trees grew taller, and the air grew cooler as the path wound through the forest-like part of the garden. Snowy felt like she was entering an entirely new world, one that was hidden just beyond the familiar garden she had always known. After a few moments, they came to a clearing. The sunlight filtered through the trees, creating a golden glow around a small, sparkling pond. Snowy stopped, her paws gently touching the soft earth beneath her. The little creature stood beside her, looking at the pond. Snowy felt something change in the air, something magical, as if the pond itself was alive with wonder. The water shimmered in the sunlight, and Snowy felt drawn to it. Without thinking, Snowy stepped closer to the pond and peered into the water. She saw her reflection, but it wasn't just her reflection. In the water, Snowy saw something else. Images of the garden, of the flowers and trees, but also of faraway places she had never seen. The pond showed her visions of other worlds, places beyond the garden, full of adventures she could only dream of. The little creature beside her meowed softly, as though it understood the magic of the pond. Snowy gazed into the water for a long time, lost in the images of distant lands and strange creatures. She felt a sense of longing, as though the pond was showing her the many paths she could take. The world was so much bigger than she had ever imagined. There was so much to explore, so much to discover. But as Snowy stared into the water, she realized something important. The adventures she had, the places she saw, were all wonderful. But they didn't compare to the love and warmth of her home with Lily. The world was big and full of wonders, but Lily's house, with its familiar smells and cozy corners, would always be her true home. Snowy looked at the little creature one last time, and the creature seemed to understand. It nodded, then slowly turned and walked back into the trees. Snowy hesitated for just a moment before following it back to the garden, where the sunlight was now softer and the shadows longer. When Snowy returned home, she saw Lily sitting by the window, waiting for her. The soft light of the setting sun bathed the garden in a golden hue, and Snowy felt a deep sense of peace. She padded back to the house, her paws light on the ground, and hopped onto the windowsill beside Lily. Lily smiled as she gently petted Snowy. "Did you have a good adventure, Snowy?" she asked. Snowy purred softly, rubbing her head against Lily's hand. She didn't need to answer with words. The adventures of the world outside were exciting, but it was here, with Lily, that she truly felt at home. And so, Snowy settled in beside Lily, content and happy. The adventures would continue, but there was no place like home. For both Snowy and Lily, the greatest adventure of all was the love and companionship they shared. They knew that no matter where the path would lead, they would always have each other, and that was the greatest adventure of all.